Stay tuned for another episode of the Coming Soon podcast with Spider.
Hello, everybody. Spider here once again, Coming Soon podcast, being joined by Kellen Garner and Christopher Sheffield. Gentlemen, how are you doing?
What's up, guys?
Doing great. Thank you for having us.
No, thank you guys. I know time's in essence, everybody's busy. It's midweek, but I appreciate you guys jumping on here now. Of course, I have you guys on here for a reason, and that's about this film, this supernatural Western that I was fortunate to see, man. It's actually on Apple TV, so for those that are going to be watching this, they can definitely check it out on there. But I wanted to talk a little bit as far as I don't want to say the progress, but as far as the time frame, because I know I talked to Christopher a little bit when it came to for you guys to shoot the film. So Kellen, can you go ahead and break that down for us? What was the time frame on the filming?
Well, it was tricky because there were two things at play. Well, maybe more than two, but the two biggest ones were weather was a factor. When we were ready to roll camera, it was the middle of the summer. We were greenlit. We had the money. We had all of the resources in place. The tricky thing about indie film, and this is just something I'm sure Christopher agrees that when you're ready to shoot and you have all those ducks in a row, go shoot. Because if you wait or put off, those things might fall apart. Something will disappear for you, and then you're in trouble. So we decided to jump into filming in the summertime, even though we knew we had a winter set story. The first act of our film takes place in a town, and we knew we could get away with that up until the point where our characters go up into the mountains where we needed snow. That was the point at which we knew. I think initially we thought, well, it doesn't need to be a snowy landscape. We can sell that it's cold. But the more we thought about it aesthetically, we really thought that would add to the drama. The other major factor was the age of our baby, which plays a major role in the film. Babies age very quickly. Oh, yeah. And so there was kind of a sweet spot because this is a vulnerable child that needs to be nursed and fed and can't walk, doesn't talk yet. It's not a toddler. So we knew that if we put things off or waited too long, then that child would age out of that role and we would have to go find a replacement. And that presents a whole another slew of challenges. So there was a lot of doll work because there's so much stunt work in the film. We never put the baby in harm's way, but that was certainly a factor into deciding when to go ahead and go, but also waiting for weather to happen. And then we got too much weather, and that created some circumstances where we had to, think on the fly. And thank goodness we had resources in place to help us manufacture new locations and get around some of the weather challenges. There was historic blizzards that winter in Arizona. Yeah. And while we wanted winter, it was just, it's like when you go to a restaurant and you ask the waiter to put Parmesan on your salad.
Oh yeah.
We just forgot to say when, and it just kept coming. And so it was great, but it was a little too much. And so we had to find better locations with less snow to make those landscapes work, because this movie, so much of it takes place outdoors, which is a real challenge for any production, but especially for an independent Western, So
no, for sure. And that was one of my questions, because I did see snow, and I said, okay, I know they didn't buy it. You can't buy it. You can, but it's just, I was like, I know it was out in the open, so I was kind of curious as far as the time frame. The fact that it was shot in Arizona. Both you guys are not from Arizona, correct?
No, we are.
We both met in Arizona. So that's the first movies that we started working on were in Arizona, and then I moved to LA, and then Kellen ended up moving to Florida, and so we were just kind of been all over. But a lot of our initial contacts and our first Western films that we did were in Arizona. And when you're an indie production, especially something like a period movie, costumes, weapons, horses, locations, all of that stuff is specialty market. So wherever you can go that has the most amount of hookups for your for your price point, for your accessibility, like that's where you shoot the movie. So for us, like that was 100% going to be Arizona. We had the most amount of capability there, and then also our executive producer, who was the one that initially came to Kellen and said like, "Hey, I want a Western. If you've got a Western, let's make one."
Nice.
All of his money and resources are in Arizona, so it was like kind of a no-brainer that was where we're going to shoot it.
No, for sure, man. And of course, I mean, the fact that you guys had permission to shoot where you did, I mean, of course, that was where was that at? Tell us exactly.
You mean
Uh,
the town or the
The town.
Yeah, the town was it's actually it's a Western town, but it's more of an amusement park. It's meant as a sort of a tourist attraction for people to kind of spend the day and have the sort of Wild West experience, much like like a Renaissance festival would be. And those types of things are pretty popular in the Southwest. I'm sure Texas has a handful of them as well. And we knew some people that worked there and had connections there. That was a location where it was, like Chef said, it was a no-brainer to shoot there because it was free to us. Because we had existing relationships with management and we had shot things there previously and shot things for them. They were more than happy to have us. And so while it's not necessarily a back lot or a perfect film location for what we needed it for, it was going to work. There was actually technically two locations like that. The other was a museum of historic buildings where we used it for interiors, things like a Victorian house, the interior of a bank, the interior of a courtroom, which is actually a church. Those were all shot in the same area in the Phoenix area. And then up north, when we get into the mountains, again, most of that is national forest. Some of it's Apache reservation land, some of it privately owned. It's just kind of a mix of what we could get access to, what we had permission to shoot on. It all cohesively looks like the same location. And so we knew that was going to work for the majority of the rest of the movie up there.
Nice, bro. Nice. And of course, I mean, like you mentioned, because I mean, I am in San Antonio. I mean, of course, Texas. I mean, we actually shot in this small town, a couple of acres that actually has a ghost town. You know, it was abandoned like years back, and it just stayed up. But I was kind of curious about the buildings because I said, man, I wonder if it was like a ghost town or something. But no, it was an amusement, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of art department work that had to be done to make sure that like modern amenities were covered, because there are, in a place like that, especially in Arizona, like they got to have AC in the buildings and stuff. It's not like a back lot where it's just a bunch of wooden buildings. They have to have plumbing and stuff. So there was a lot of like really clever production design work done by our team to just cover pipes, obscure things, and stuff like that, which is just again crazy on a minimum budget. Like sometimes it's as simple as like, hey, make that cowboy stand right there and don't tell him not to move. Like, and then we don't see the air conditioning unit anymore. So it's like little stuff like that. It was the biggest headache, funny enough, was at night, because like the Western town itself, it was easy for us to kind of hide things in lighting, but it's not that far from the city. And so there's like distant city lights that I have to keep trying to like keep out of camera because we're supposed to be in the middle of the, the Old West. Like there's no cities out there, man. It's all, it should be all desert land. So.
Man, and of course, I mean, when it comes to supernatural, I mean, of course, Wendigo folklore, it's something. I mean, here in San Antonio, of course, we have as well. I mean, folklore stories everywhere. So, was that a pet peeve for you guys? I mean, was that something that you guys were like, man, we got to write about this or work on this?
I think the earliest origins of this, the conversations before the conversation for Chef and I going back, we had done a couple Westerns. I had really wanted to do a monster movie, but I didn't feel like I had an access point into it. The two ideas that I kind of floated together in my head was I'd love to do a werewolf movie in the snow, instead of like in London or Paris or something that felt very like primal and like, putting people in the wolves environment. That idea kind of didn't really go anywhere, but when we started on this project, then that idea of a werewolf sort of morphed into a Wendigo. But one thing that was important to us, I think, was we didn't want to spend any time in the movie trying to explain what this thing actually is and what it's doing and what its motives are, because I think things like this are scarier when our characters are kind of unreliable narrators. None of the survivors come to the end of the film with an understanding of what they've just been a part of. It's like films like Jurassic Park spend an entire first act explaining how this event is possible, and then the rest of the movie they're trying to survive those circumstances. And yet they come away, it's kind of this cautionary tale of, well, we played with fire and we got burned. Jaws, kind of the same thing. We understand that sharks behave instinctually.
Right.
They're not acting out of malice. So that was kind of a thing where it's like people will recognize what a shark is and how dangerous it is. If we show right in the first 5 minutes that whatever this thing is,
Yeah.
without giving away, anything, is dangerous, then putting people in its path will present a certain amount of drama and tension without spending too much. I hate those scientific speeches about somehow Palpatine returned. It's just
Yeah.
bad writing. It's boring to watch. It makes your audience feel like you think they're dumb because you need everything explained to you. And I just don't find it very interesting. So as soon as we locked in on like, well, it's Wendigo like, and that's going to mean something different for whoever's watching it. And
Yeah,
we
that's the
came up-
cool thing, is that like that sort of mythos just appears in so many different cultures. Even just like state to state, it changes. Like in the Old West, and then we found out, after being on set with our sort of Apache actors and giving them a lot of deference to like the cultural representation for themselves on camera. Like we were having a lot of conversations with them as we were shooting to make sure we were doing, stuff that was like appropriate and that they were making choices that they would be proud of. And part of that is we got some stories about their folklore, and they had a completely different, not different, but like they had their own sort of understanding of what the demon of the film was. So in that way, it was cool. It was like, okay, so this is, the less that we say about it, the better. The more malleable it becomes to everybody's individual culture when they watch it. Like the point is that it's deadly. It's essentially a force of nature, and it corrupts from one body to the next. And aside from that, like you can sort of like understand it inside of your individual culture, and it becomes a more personal experience for you. So yeah, like Kellen said, we liked that approach a lot more than wasting any screen time telling somebody what this thing is and what the rules of it are. It's like, no, let's just make them survive it. Like you don't know what it's going to do next. So
No. I mean, that was brilliant because it's got build up. I mean, I was fortunate to watch the film, man, and I mean, I enjoyed it. I sat through it.
Thank you.
I know I was telling Christopher earlier. For me, a film it's like an hour and 30 tops, man. Like that's my personal limit. And I always tell people like if it's over an hour and 30, it's got to be good, man. Like it just my attention span just stops at that point. But it kept me going and it kept me guessing and it kept me wanting to see what was going to happen next. So. That's the kind of film I want. Like you said, I don't want an explanation. Let me just go through all those emotions, all that buildup, and at the end, it's like, damn, okay, you know what? Like I survived the film too. Made me part of the movie.
That's good. That's. Thank you for saying that, man. That means a lot.
But of course, when it comes to folklore, I mean, I know you guys have been making Western films. I mean, like Christopher mentioned earlier, there's a lot more folklore stories out there that you guys were told. I mean, is there more? Are you guys? I mean, not yet, but like in the future, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're always talking about
yeah,
what is next. I mean, I literally emailed Chef a pitch that I kind of built over the weekend, right before this conversation started.
Oh, nice.
That's kind of coming from that same vein of I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a horror aficionado, but one thing I've appreciated about this experience, especially now that it's released and I'm getting feedback from people, is horror is, regardless of what genre it's filtered through. It's funny because to me, horror and Western are separate genres, and any streamer that you go onto, they're going to be separated. But I don't necessarily look at Westerns across the board as their own genre. There can be lots of different, it could be a neo-Western, it can be a samurai film, it could be a space opera. And so it has a lot of shades. And the same is true of horror, because I would argue that something like The Killing Fields or Schindler's List is as much a horror story as, Halloween. It's
Right.
just a different tone, setting, execution. So what I've realized about jumping into this horror space is that horror is a great palette for examining humanity in all of it, like in the its good and its bad shades, and it can be very metaphorical. And as a writer, that's such a rich canvas to play on that I guess I just assumed jumping into something like this that it was about building jump scares into the plot and trying to get a visceral reaction. But what surprised me about the screenings that I've been to with audiences, yes, there were a few of those moments, but it was the heart and the humanity and the humor that they responded to the most, and where there was an audible reaction. And I thought, wow, that's really important, I guess. That's something to
Right.
chase, even if you're going to do something that's, I like my grandparents watched the film yesterday and they said, it was very bloody, but we actually really loved it. Had kind of a sweet message. And I'm like, if they're getting something out of it, I'm like, blood is in the title. It's advertised.
Yeah.
There will be blood. But I would argue that was equally as important to Chef and I. We could just go make a shock horror gore fest.
Oh, yeah.
But I frankly wouldn't do it because I'd be bored to tears. And I think Chef would as well, because I know the things that he likes as well. So folklore, sure. But mainly it's just about how to tap into what we've done with this film and carry that over into the next project, whether that's a direct sequel or it's something completely original.
No, for sure. And I mean, I was going to mention too, because I mean, when it comes to the viewings, I mean, you guys have had a few. Was the response different? And let me say this: I mean, when it came to your family, your friends and family watching it, to say, the Apache tribe that were there, I mean, was it different? Like, did you kind of notice them reacting to it differently?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I do come from a horror background, and so like Kellen and I, the whole time that we were making this film, we were on this kind of balance theme of we're like Western horror, and then making sure those things were always kind of speaking to each other. But one of my first like fears coming out of it once we had finished the movie is because I am so in the horror community, I was like, damn, like, do they have enough payoff? Like, is there enough horror? Is there enough blood? Is there enough like tense moments? Is it, does it do its job? And then, but I forget that, like, the horror community is huge, but the grander, wide audience, the world's audience is much larger. And so where I'm like wondering, like, damn, is this going to be enough? And then, we have our trailer, and I start showing my trailer to people, and they're like, oh, I'm like, oh, it works a little bit, and then we get to the premiere, and you've got, an audience full of people like responding when you first see the creature, or like responding when it's something as for somebody like on the horror side, something as simple as somebody getting shot in the face. But people who don't, engage in those kind of films all the time, even that carries its own level of horror with it. Like Helen was saying earlier, like there's, horror kind of embedded in a lot of the human experiences in the film. So I was very, very pleasantly surprised at how much the film did for the audience, both for the horror, because horror fans were the first ones to watch it. Like, we did a couple podcasts, and horror fans were the initial ones to watch it and had a great response to it. And then at the premiere, I would argue that probably 80% of that audience was not a horror watching audience, and they absolutely loved it. Like, people went crazy for it, which is really cool. And then, like Helen said, right now we've got a theatrical run going on in Northern Arizona. And those audiences are there, there's, like I said, White Mountain Apache audiences up there, and they're loving it. So it's really cool. I think that it's balanced enough. We did a good enough job balancing it that you can watch it whether or not you're a casual horror fan, or if you're just a movie fan in general.
No, you see, and I was gonna say too, because even before, when I had seen this Gnosis on this, I was like, you know what? I grew up watching westerns with my dad. It was always our thing. I mean, we watched Western films, wrestling, kung fu theater, and then of course horror movies, right? But I related to it. I mean, the storyline, for one thing, like Kellen had mentioned earlier, made sense for there to be a story, because you could have easily been like, oh, he's just gonna from beginning to end, he's gonna go around killing everybody. That's
We're just killing cowboys for
yeah,
2 hours.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, the fact
Yeah.
that there's a storyline, there's a built, there's characters, there's chemistry. Like that's
Mm.
personally that's what I want to watch. I don't want to be bored in the film and just be like, okay, well, he just killed everybody. Like, what's next? What's gonna happen? But yeah, I mean, because of that, I enjoyed it. The whole Western thing, and I don't know if it's safe to say it was, for me. It felt like a Western with heart in it. Because of the
I think
storyline.
that's
So I
fair.
was like, yeah, so it was great. The characters. I mean, for the most part, for me, I don't want to say I related to them, because of course I'm not. I'm city folk. I don't know anything about being out in the world. But it's just like I could imagine like myself being that character and be like, oh damn, you know what? From them robbing the bank, from them being chased, from them being trapped in the woods. It's like one of those like when people say, what can go worse, or how can it get any worse? And
Yeah.
it's like, there it goes.
Yeah,
So,
Kellen and I both have a stance on storytelling. We both fucking hate it when characters make stupid decisions. Like, we hate watching dumb people in a movie, and it's like the whole movie, just for us, I think for both of us, just sticks with us so much harder if the characters are trying their best, man. Like, they're doing everything they can, as smart as they can in the moment, but the conflict is just greater than them, and I think that's a compelling story. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter how well they handle themselves, they're not going to be able to stop this creature. And then, when they end up in a room surrounded by people who eat people, like, they can only do so much to get out of that room, So it's like, instead of them just like blindly walking in like a slasher, character or whatever, like just kind of blindly walking in a room being like, you in here? Like, they can't escape the circumstances. And I think, to me, that makes it a much more compelling movie to watch, when you can actually, like you said, you can identify with the characters and sort of start feeling their struggle, which I think is the only way that we earned that extra 30 minutes of your attention. So.
No, definitely, bro. I mean, let me say this though, because I know earlier Kellen had mentioned as far as the baby, because you guys did use a doll for the most part, right? I mean, when it came to some of the scenes.
Just for a lot of the stunt stuff, anything physical and dangerous, for sure we used.
Anything shooting a gun or running with the baby, or like horses, anything like that, we kept the baby free of danger in that sense.
And so, because of that, the reason I was asking was because the baby crying. You guys had audio of that the whole time when it came to editing, right?
Yeah, we had plenty of that in the can, just from the scenes where we were using live baby, and she was, given that it was cold outside and she was often tired and hungry. Anytime though, she was going to cry, we let her. And we rolled sound on it, because we knew we were going to loop. We knew we were going to use it all.
And also, I don't know if this has been said yet, but that's Kellen's child. So yeah.
What?
Yeah. So one of our producers, Bridget, his wife, was basically like off camera, like baby in hand, until we absolutely needed her. Like, cameras are rolling, okay. She'd pass her over. We would do the scene. As soon as we cut, she'd come in there and collect her. So that baby was safe the entire time, 100%.
Okay.
Well, and I don't, one thing that really bothers me about specifically infant performances in movies, you'll see this a lot in, like, let's say it's like I don't know, just a war movie or something, where a child accidentally gets left behind and the cameras are rolling and you see like a baby just sitting on the ground with chaos around.
Yeah.
What bothers me about that is the assumption when we're watching a film is that everybody is performing, everybody is pretending. But those circumstances are actually very manipulative. It's creating a trauma for a baby so that we can capture it on film. That child is not developed enough to know that the danger or the fear that they're feeling, the anxiety, is unnecessary, that they're totally safe. So it actually takes me out of a movie when I see a child that's like in harm's way and then someone scoops them up at the last second. And I've seen it up to the age of 3 or 4, where you think there's no way that's a performance. That child is too young to perform. So it was tricky with this, because we knew a lot of anxiety and tension would come from this child being in peril. And yet, how do we create a circumstance where we get an authentic performance without ever actually putting my daughter in a circumstance where she feels terror. And so even though on camera it seems as though she is confronted by this demonic creature, she never actually was ever on set or stage with the creature. That never happened. So any of her fear and anxiety is usually just separation anxiety. And it's usually pretty brief. It's pretty much like, hey, I didn't want to be set down. My mom's across the room. I want her to hold me. That's where the fear and the terror and the crying and the upset, all that came from. It was never like, let's put her down and bring in a killer clown and scare the daylights out of her. Because that's a point of like, it's really a pet peeve of mine. It takes me out of a movie faster than breaking the fourth wall, because I know it's inauthentic.
Is that she was actually so comfortable, like in real life, that there are 2 moments on camera where things are tense for everybody else but her, and like her little like precious moments. That there's one in the middle. I won't give anything away, but in one scene, things are tense, and then she like lifts up and starts catching snowflakes on her tongue, like the cutest shit. We're like, great, that's in the movie. And then the other one is it's like this really like dangerous scene at the end of the film. Both characters are in like maybe one of the worst places they're going to be the whole movie, and she gives like the cutest baby smile in the world. And like as I was shooting that, I was like, yes, okay, this kid's a star. It was the perfect expression. And in the theater, the whole, like, it was like you heard a whole theater go, "Aw," like at the same time, you know, when you got that smile. It was great. So she was safe, comfortable, well-fed, warm, everything. Yeah, enough so that it gave us a really fun layered moment twice in the film.
No, for sure. And I agree when it comes to, you know, putting a child in those situations, because, you know, I mean, as kids, and you see it now, like there's, I attend a lot of conventions, and parents are like, oh, you know, scaring the hell out of their kids. And I'm like, man, that's freaking, you know,
it's no different. It's no different than these apocryphal stories you hear about directors behaving badly and like verbally abusing actors to coax the performance. How is it any different? What it tells me is I haven't thought this through on how to do my job well. So I'm going to be manipulative to get what I want, which is not the sign of a good director to me. That's nonsense. And these stories are apocryphal because they happened decades ago. Today, you would get canceled for it. You would lose your contract. You would never get hired again. But because we revere some of these people because of their body of work, we were like, oh, well, that's just how he did things. He just berated me and yelled at me and locked me in a closet until I was actually crying. Like, that's unacceptable to do to adults. So if you do it to a minor, that's child abuse. And so it was a tricky thing, because on an independent film, you have no time, no money, no resources. And so we had to be very meticulous in how much do we show the baby, how much do we hold back. The blanket was a sort of a huge saving grace for us, because it becomes kind of this like almost a MacGuffin. You know, they're carrying this red blanket the entire film, and anytime it was a perilous experience or there's action involved, it's totally a doll. There was never a time where we're like, well, I want to see it for real. I want to see the mud and the blood and the tears. I'm like, that's nonsense. Like, I got to live with this child, and she's got to, you know, I want her to respect and love me for the rest of my life. Like, this is what my dad did to me in order to get ahead in his career.
Yeah, you see, and that's one of those things. I mean, of course, and I'll just jump into the story real quick, because I mean, I was born and raised here in San Antonio. I think it was in the late 70s. There was we have a parade that we do every year, and it's called Battle of the Flowers. It was the late 70s. I was actually out there with my sister. I didn't know. I was like 5 years old. I had no clue. Throughout growing up, I always had nightmares. I always like woke up, you know, panicking, people running. I didn't know. I thought it was a movie. I didn't know what it was. When I was like 9 years old, 9, 10, watching the news with my mom, and they're talking about that sniper, that incident. And my mom's like, oh, look, that's where you and your sister were. And I was like, I was there. And she was like, yeah, you were like, you know, and I looked up the year, and I was just like, damn, like, and it was because of that. I was
oh my gosh.
PTSD, man. Like, I was having nightmares because of the commotion. I mean, you know, he shot people. People were running, scared, of course. You know, my sister just pulling me by my arm the whole time, just running. And that was my nightmare. I was just having like memory, you know, kept coming back at night, I guess. And but yeah, you know, I mean, they feel that stuff, man. And it's just like, for you to put a kid, your kid in that situation. Just doesn't make any sense. So
Well,
great.
the running, sort of joke in my house is because I have more than one child, and all my kids know that it's a scary movie, and that it's maybe not appropriate for them at that because of
Right.
how young they are. They have no interest in seeing it right now. I'm sure one day they'll watch it. But yeah, the irony of she's front and center in the movie now that she's older. She asked when we went to the premiere, she's like, "Did you go to my movie?" I said, "Yeah, I went to your movie." And she's like, "I don't want to watch it." I'm like, "You don't have to watch it," because she can't separate
Right.
the trauma from what's on screen. So
Man.
one day she'll look back and I'm certainly glad as her father to have this little timepiece.
Yeah.
Because she's older now and I don't have babies anymore. To look back and to see her at that age is really, really cool.
Oh
because
yeah.
that's just such a rare thing to have a child performance like that. And for her to just not only just be adequate in the role, but just completely nail it and steal the movie from me.
Yeah.
It's just
Stole it from her father.
Stole it from me. It's just one of my favorite memories of that production. So I'm happy that people are getting to see that now, because I do think that heart that is the center of our movie is why audiences are responding the way they are to it right now.
No, for sure, man. And of course, I mean, I was going to jump down to Christopher, but I mean, you had mentioned, I mean, as far as your past work, I mean, you coming from horror, actually enjoying horror movies. On this one, I mean, of course, you're going to be biased because you took part in this, but I mean, what would you rate this yourself? I mean, when it comes to horror, I mean, would you say like
when it comes to horror?
50? Yeah.
No, I think I'll be completely unbiased. I think it's a very approachable film for somebody who doesn't watch horror. Like we didn't push it too far. Like there is some gore in the film. There are some deaths that happen on camera that again, there's a certain it's a balancing act. Like I can show somebody getting their head bit off to a point, and then we got to cut away. And so we only do enough. But I mean, there's some pretty intense stuff. We see a knife go through a foot. We see somebody get their face slashed open. Like there like people getting shot left and right. There's quite a bit of blood in them hills. But I do think that but like I tried to, that's one of the reasons that I tried to make sure, in a lot of the initial like press and talking to people, that I call it a supernatural Western, because I think that I don't think we spend as much of the movie trying to horrify you as we would if this was like Pumpkinhead. It's not about the creature stomping through the woods, ripping people to shreds. That happens, but that's not the point of the film. So it is a supernatural Western. I would say, I mean, I think there's like 9, maybe less Western horror films like in the market that we, everybody's collectively aware of. So I'd say we'd rate probably somewhere in the middle of that intensity scale, where like, if you're not into horror, if you don't like dark stuff, you're probably not going to like love the film. But if you are into horror, like it's a very easy watch. Like you're not going to need a palate cleanser after our movie. Like we cleanse your palate all on our own. Like, we wrap it up. There's, like you said, there's human elements, there's good story in there. So it's not wall to wall horror. Supernatural Western, I think, is a great way to call it, but I think it fits just fine. For me as a horror fan, if I watched it, I'd be like, wow, they did some cool stuff. Oh, look, practical effects. Like I tried to do the things that would serve me as an audience member, which like physical violence and creature stuff. I love both of those in genres. So yeah.
No, for sure. And I mean, just like Kellen had mentioned earlier too, I mean, you don't want to bore your fans. You don't want to have them sit there for like an hour wondering like what the heck's what's going on. And then the last 30 minutes, it's like, oh, okay, now it's starting to get good.
Yeah, no, it's funny because Kellen and I both, like I said, we come from 2 different disciplines, which is why we kind of like, like came together on this film. Is that like I come from the horror side, he comes from the Western side. We both have a ton of crossover. We love a lot of the same movies that have nothing to do with either of those genres. But that was our mixed expertise. And both of our next projects, like Helen is moving on to his next to his next Western, and I'm moving on to my next horror, which will both be a fully embracing each of the genres. So if you guys watch this movie and you like the horror or you like the Western, stick around, because either one of us will have our next movie for you that will be a more blast of that flavor in either version. So yeah.
Oh, for sure. And let me ask you guys this because of the timeline. Like I had mentioned earlier, I mean, was there? I'm sure I've been in the indie films. You know, there's hour. I mean, it's like I tell people we shoot like 8 hours, and that was like 15 minutes of the film, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
about. You know, so on this, I mean, could it have easily been like two movies in one? Like if
Almost,
you,
yeah. I mean, there's a like we joked around a lot, like in the editing process, about just how much was happening in this movie at any given time. Like, there's so much going on, and so like when we did our first pass of the edit, I want to say it was well over 2 hours. It was like 2 hours 30 minutes or something. I think our first version, and so we all knew that we were going to have to go in there, and Kel and I were have to go in with a scalpel and basically chop things up.
And most of that was just not necessarily set pieces because you spend so much time. The set pieces are such a thoughtful part of it where you're like, you're going to invest a ton of money and a ton of time in creating these big blocks. All of the set pieces that are in this movie are the set pieces we intended. What probably got cut in that process though was maybe some side stories and some
Right.
other characters that were developed even further, where we felt that it was too much of a tangent or it pulled too much the audience's attention away from the real driving force, which is that this movie is essentially a chase movie. Once we set things in motion after the bank robbery, it becomes a chase film, and it's certain groups being chased. And so we found that through line in the edit and realized anything that's tertiary to that is got to go because it's unnecessary. So we wanted to get through the first act as quickly as possible because we knew in the middle we were going to slow things down and build character a little bit, build the tension and the circumstances. So we tried to get to that point as quickly as possible. And then we knew with the third act we were just going to bring it home and hit everything really, really hard with the Western, with the horror. Like that's one thing, he talked about being something that entry level for horror fans. But as far as the Western elements go, despite the fact that it has supernatural elements, we played all the Western stuff as honestly as we could and tried to serve that fan base as much as possible by giving you Western action, by giving you gunfights, by giving you fist fights, knife fights, and an Indian attack. Like we put all of that on top of the fact that there's a monster, hunting our main character. So yeah, it is a full, wall to wall. Like that was the one thing we didn't know if the horror was going to work or the action or the humor. What we did know, and we said this after every edit, well, it moves. It doesn't feel its runtime like
there's a lot going on.
Quick movie. There's a lot going on. It keeps your attention from scene to scene, as our characters are going along.
No, definitely. And I agree because there was a lot going on, and I say that in the good way because it's like they're trying to fend themselves, and they're at the same time they're being attacked, and the Wendigos, and it's just everywhere, man. So you're kind of like, okay, what's gonna hit first, right? Now, let me ask you, with this film being made, I mean, it's already set in stone. Are you guys thinking like sequel, or is this enough for you guys to be content?
No, we're definitely thinking sequel. The thing is that because it's an indie film, like it has to sort of be justified monetarily for us to be able to do that. Right. Because like I said, we both have other projects that Kellen and I we're never stagnant. Like even as we were in post for this, we were developing our next thing. And once this one got sold, we were already moving on to getting budgets for our next thing. So we would absolutely we had, by the time that we got done with this film, we had sort of understood the story at a greater point than we ever did, like when Kellen first wrote the script. So we know exactly what we would do with the sequel, and it's a lot of really, really cool stuff. We'd be sort of genre blending again. We'd move into a whole different realm. We play with a different group of supernatural elements. But for that to happen, this movie has to do good first. So we're really, really hoping, as best we can. And again, thank you for like having us on this and helping us kind of spread the word about it, because when you're indie, like this is the only option we have to get this movie in front of people is to do stuff on social media and to like push it ourselves and spend a lot of our own money to make sure people see it. But if the movie does well, then we would be justified in going and finding going through the struggle of finding all the money for the next section of it. But the next story, I will, if we get to make it, it will absolutely kick ass. Like, we have some really, really, really cool ideas that, because like, and you know this as a filmmaker, like every movie you make, you get a little bit better. And so like, the movies that we've made since we shot this one, even the stuff that we've done in the meantime has only been bigger and better. And so, yeah, if we get to do it again, it's only going to be like on a grander scale, like everything, the horror, the action, all of it will be sort of amped up to a new level. So kind of, I mean, similar to the way that like, Terrifier, right? The first one was a tiny film. The second one was massive, just because it was able to pick up a fan base. And we don't have any killer clowns in this movie, but if we can get even a quarter of that fan base for this film, we can bring something cool to them for the next one for sure.
No, and my question to Kellen, of course, I mean, is your daughter going to be in the sequel?
I don't want to spoil anything. I will speak somewhat to what Jeff just said about, I've been flattered by some of the response. Yeah. It's not the first time we've been asked about a sequel. Our audiences at our premieres have asked that. I wouldn't necessarily say that we structured the film with the intention. Like, we did kind of put a button on the thing and felt like this is a complete story. We don't do that cheap trick of like, setting up the next thing necessarily. So it's a testament, I think, to the execution that people would want to see more of what is next. Now, what I will say is that any quick guesses as to what that would be and what it would be about have all been completely wrong. Everything, every assumption I've heard from an audience member about what it is so far the opposite direction of what Chef and I have really latched onto with this first one, which was what we liked about this genre bending. How do we expand this world? Where does that take us, and what does that look like? We don't want to repeat ourselves. A lot of times sequels are made in very bad faith because it's a business decision. Right. A studio says, this worked, there's no risk, let's go back and do it again, let's retread the path. We are filmmakers who are fighting uphill to get our careers where we want them. And there's a lot of ideas that come with that. Like he said, we have other projects that are in development that are being financed that are going to take up a lot of our time in the next couple of years. So to go back to this story and tell another chapter, again, it's a question of economics, not just the economics of a budget, but the economics of our time. Is it worth telling? Is there something new to say? Do we have more resources than we had the first time? And now with sharpened skills and more knowledge under our belts, what can we do then to continue to entertain an audience? I have a lot of confidence in our ability to execute that. But again, it comes down to the demand for it. There's no reason to do it as a vanity exercise. Right. It has to be justified. I apologize for coughing so much.
No, you're fine.
Dealing with
no, not a problem. And I was curious too, and I was going to ask because I mean, of course, the fact that you guys meshed, Western with Supernatural, and you did mention a werewolf earlier, man. So can we see a werewolf versus Wendigo thing going on?
Werewolf versus Wendigo. So they just keep infecting each other, like.
Oh yeah.
Now you're getting into AVP territory.
Yeah, I think that's gonna have to be once we're 3 movies into the Blood franchise, we'll have to make a prequel, and it'll be werewolves and Wendigos going at it.
Oh yeah, there you go.
It'd be like the Underworld franchise.
Let's do it. No, but you know what? I mean, the setup. I mean, the fact that you guys were out, like you said. I mean, you had the weather. You had, I'm sure scheduling. The fact that you guys were finally able to make it happen. I mean, there's always stress when you guys. I'm sure when you guys are out there. I mean, there's so many things you can't control. But I mean, did everything pretty much work for the most part, man? I mean, when it came to finishing this.
I mean, the short answer is no, and the long answer is yes. Because like in the short answer, like this was easily out of the entire pantheon of films that I have worked on in any capacity, this was the most difficult film that I have ever shot. Like this was, we were so like, razor thin on resources, but huge on what we wanted to do. And then we had, like you said, we had weather in Arizona. We had, 115 to 120 degrees with humidity because it was monsoon season. So we had monsoons that would come through, these like crazy little desert storms that wash through for 10 minutes and just wipe out the set. So like that happened a bunch in the first week of filming. Very difficult to make it through that week. And then the next round of filming, like Kellen said, there was a big gap, and then we came back for the winter unit, and we had like historic blizzards in that area. So all the locations that Kellen had meticulously scouted on his own time, we could no longer physically access with a car because the snow was too much.
Oh, wow.
So like as soon as we rolled up there, it was like, get out, get in this locals truck, let's start driving. We got to find locations to shoot. But also in that second round, we had one of our lead actress, Aria, ended up having to be absent for a lot of it because she got stuck in Florida with COVID because she was working on a commercial and had contracted COVID. Yeah. And she's fine now, obviously, but that was like a huge burden to the production schedule. We were like, damn, like how are we're gonna have to push all of these scenes where the three of them are together, because there was no world in which Kellen and I wanted to do this, where it was just like close up, close up, close up. Like we want to see all three of them together. We had all these like cinematic ideas. I mean, you saw the way that we kind of like wrapped the camera around them all the time. And, we didn't want to give up on these ideas, even though, like I said, we were razor thin on resources. So we had to wait until she was in the clear and then come back as soon as we all could, because there was, we had to make sure there was still snow on the ground, the baby didn't grow, that we didn't lose the momentum of our production money, all of that stuff. So the movie was like, it was like one thing after the next of like, that doesn't work, let's fix it. And so Kellen and I were in constant sort of like fixing mode the entire film, while as best we can trying to kind of protect the movie like it was our own little baby in the woods. Like we were just like, no, you can't, like none of this is going to get to the film, like trying to dodge arrows. And thankfully it worked. Like you can't tell in the final product that it was such an uphill struggle for us to get the movie done. So like I said, in the short answer, nothing went right. In the long answer, everything went right. The movie is exactly as it should be. But it was a hell of a journey to get there for sure.
No doubt, man. And of course, one of the things you had mentioned, I mean, when it came to the camera, I mean, I'm a sucker for angles. I'm not a professional photographer by any means, but I love shooting photos. I cover combat sports. I've been doing it for years. And for me, it's always like what's in the background. I always make sure there's a, something that like a stage, and then whoever I'm targeting, right? And so with that, there was a lot of great camera angles that caught my attention. The lighting, there was a red lighting, and I was like, man, did they do that to kind of give it that rustic look? Like when it
I mean, it's definitely, so for most of the film, we wanted to go with a very, very natural palette, because we want, like when you're doing something like a Western, like the best gift that the audience can give me when they're watching a movie, if it's a period film, is that they sink into that period. Yeah. And so you have to like adjust your visual palette to eliminate as much sort of modern style lighting as possible. Like everything has to feel organic to me, like the way that I like to shoot them. So that was a big sort of intention, is to keep things organic until they weren't. So until there was we were really intentional about the presence of the Wendigo sort of altering the natural state of things. Right. So like lighting feels a little different around it, like the way that the camera is framed, the way that you can see there's a lot of like kind of like warping and bending to the light, and there's those kind of like when you're out in the forest and it's like in the early morning, you get these like beautiful kind of like dust particles floating around. Oh, yeah. So we wanted to do like a sort of inverted version of that, where like whenever that thing's around, you've got these kind of like almost like poison, like kind of dark particles kind of floating, because it was always supposed to be kind of a corruption of the natural state of things. So that's where the places where we really played with the visuals were in anything when the Wendigo was around, kind of messing up nature basically. Other than that, it was, even during a shootout or an intense like fist fight in the woods, like I wanted to make sure that we still felt like the natural beauty of the landscape was still present, and also like the danger of the landscape, because with a Western, there's just no easy way to make those movies. You got to be out in the elements, and so we were out there freezing alongside our cast. Like our hands were just as cold, we were just as wet. Like when we were getting rained on, it was just as bad for us, trying to cover our equipment as it was for the actors who had to play the scene. So it was, that sort of gets felt all throughout the visuals. Like you can tell that we're out there, like actually in it. It doesn't feel like a studio movie. It doesn't feel like a movie shot on a backlight green screen or an AR wall. It's all we're there, boots literally on the ground in the wet, cold ground, shooting. So yeah, so I think that was I was very lucky that we could do it that way because I got to sort of have the visual palette that I really wanted, that natural like low winter sun and stuff like that.
No, for sure. You see, and that's one of the things with me. I mean, I know the other day we had a conversation, and we were talking about AI being used in films. CGI, of course, it's been used. But what is y'all's I guess view when it comes to AI in horror or in movies in general?
I got a rant on it. Callan, do you got a rant? You want me to rant?
I don't really have a. I mean, I have some. I don't have a rant. I have comments on it, but I certainly haven't fully formed. But I think you're more, positioned to answer that question.
Here's the thing.
Go.
There are a million little processes that AI can be super helpful with. If we're talking about if you got to remove something from a wall in a frame, and then you have to track that, 24 frames per second over the next, say like 2 or 3 minute take, and a computer can do that for you, great. Because I don't think the people who are in the CGI farms in America or in India are having a great time, frame by framing that thing and rotoscoping stuff. So if we can get a computer to do that stuff, cool. But as far as the actual creation of the art goes, it misses the point entirely. The point is not the product. The point is the process. Like that's the actual like point of making art is the process of making the art, and in that journey you discover something. It's the camera, the actor, the director, and the sound, all like working at the same moment to find these like incredible human things that happen when all of those things are in cohesion. It's not just that you have, like, if you just wanted to see a superhero movie put together by AI, you can watch that, but it's not going to tell you anything.
Right.
But the moment that you got, Captain picking up the hammer and the audience goes crazy, like that was a human moment written by a person for that human moment, that was earned over, a huge, over like all of these films that moment was earned. It's not just something that a computer made. It's not about how quickly you can get the product. It's the process of making it. That's where you find the gold. So the more that we can keep that process a human process where people can discover things and make mistakes and then find something cool inside those mistakes, those little gems, like that doesn't come from a computer, that comes from a person. But like if AI can be used to not make people miserable while they're doing, a menial task like rotoscoping, then great. Like it should be. And the one huge pet peeve I have that AI we need to stop doing is let's stop de-aging actors. Like I grew up with movies. I mean, we all grew up with movies where they would just cast a young person that looked like them. That was great. Let's do that. What are we doing? Why are we de-aging people? Like it's fucking weird. We don't need to do that.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, for me, it's I think we had me and my buddies had talked about it, and it was more like if it's AI for image or for a poster or something, and I said go crazy. I mean that's their thing. But when it comes to the movie itself, I was just like, man, that's like for me, that's kind of like earlier today. I go to the store for work. They send me to go pick up products or whatever items, and some kids like, hey, you know what? That's a self checkout, and I'm like, man, I don't work here, bro. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I said, this is your job. I said, I'm not trying to take your job. Like, I'll wait for the register, because it's, it is taking people's jobs. AI is the same thing. It's going to take people out of the loop. And, the whole point, like you said, is for people, for you guys to get the actual reactions, the actual, happy accidents if there are any, but the moments, I mean, you want to capture those in the film. And a lot of times when I myself jump on them or I'm doing BTS for a director, I'm like, I see those and I'm like, man, those are like on point. You're like, you can't fake that. It's just stuff that they catch on film. Like, dude, that's real.
I don't know that immediacy ever made anything better. It's not that we can get it like that. That doesn't make it better. That makes it cheaper and faster for corporations. Great for corporations. It doesn't necessarily mean that we get better films. Sorry, Kellen, go ahead. I cut you off.
Well, I was just gonna say, there's imitation in all art forms. I mean, we are filmmakers heavily influenced by the work of filmmakers before us, and they were also influenced by filmmakers that came before us. So naturally, when you make anything, you have all these little influences in your head that inform things like camera angles. Is this an homage? Did I take that line from an old movie and I just don't remember it when I wrote it? So where's that line between plagiarism? Now, I think the fear mongering that comes with AI is there are openly bad faith actors who come from this tech world who have openly admitted one day you won't need actors and you won't need a script and you won't need a set. To them, I would offer this caution. And you may even have audience members who feel like, oh, I'm not talented enough, I don't have enough experience, but I know how to run an AI program. This is my way to cut the line, okay? Just because you slay at Guitar Hero does not mean you know how to play guitar. And no one will ever come to your sold out concert just because you hit 100 perfect score, okay? They took something as complex as making an instrument and turned it into a 4-button. So you might feel good when you nail Thunderstruck from your living room, but nobody cares.
Yeah.
So this is what AI is. It's cool to use Midjourney to create some images and take the words from your brain and then you form an image. But the closer you look at that, you realize this looks ridiculous. That guy has 6 fingers. This is not a movie. It's a still image, and none of it actually makes any sense. So it's a useful tool for certain things, for formatting. I was a teacher for a while. I had kids use AI to try to write essays.
Yeah.
Problem with it is the essays they wrote were well beyond what an 8th grader was capable of. So they've learned nothing. They're not any more clever because they can't even cheat well. And I just think the industry at large, not just the film industry, but the music industry, is going to get bombarded with these bad faith actors who think that they have a grip on what this industry is, but they don't actually understand it because they don't come at it from a place of art. They're not in they have no intention of making art. They're trying to commercialize and monetize the illusion of art. And what will happen is people will not allow it to take over because the uncanny valley exists and people are just too sophisticated. They know the difference between something that was painted by hand and something that a computer made in 5 seconds. And we dismiss it. We just reject it immediately. We just know that's fake. That's not real. It's nobody put their hands on that. It's boring.
Yeah.
And I just think, so I don't worry about it in the same sense because I know that it can't, while it has some useful tricks and tools, it will never compete with the human imagination. It just won't. It just won't because it's just
you said you didn't have a rant on it. That was a good rant.
Thank you. I just
I wasn't going to say it, but there you go.
You shot from the hip.
No, gentlemen. That was actually well said, man. I appreciate you guys saying that because I agree fully. You know, it's just an indie film. It's you guys are artists. You guys are out there, putting your imagination and creating it. Making people see what you guys are seeing. So definitely kudos on that. And we're going to be wrapping this up, gentlemen. But Ellen, anything you want to say before we wrap this up?
Just watch our film and tell us what you thought. Write us a review. If you didn't like it, let us know. Because that helps us too, because that feedback informs our choices and our craft. And so it's useful to get feedback from an audience. That's what all of us want. If we could sit in a space in the theater with all of you and watch it in a communal experience, we would. The industry is in a different place right now. So we're sharing this to a widest audience we can grab. And we just hope people will give us 2 hours of their time to sit and watch what we've made.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Christopher,
please check out the film. Please write us a review, Letterboxd or IMDb. We love it. If you had a good time, share it with your friends. Like these kind of groundswell things only work if you guys as the audience help us out. Like if you guys share the movie with your friend, that changes everything for us. And Kellen and I are both very, very, very committed to our audiences. We think about the audience the entire time we're making a film. We want to make good movies for you for the rest of our lives. So the more that you guys can help this one be a success, the more that we can move on and give you our next one even quicker. So please check the movie out. If you love it, if you hate it, let us know, and we'll make the next one better for you.
There you go. Everybody out there, don't hang up, gentlemen. Everybody out there, of course, once again, make sure you see it on Apple TV, Blood in Them Hills. Kellen Garner, Christopher Sheffield, gentlemen, thank you for jumping on this. Everybody out there, of course, once again, Spider here, Coming Soon podcast. So next time.